Understanding ourselves deeper can be a great challenge, especially at the beginning when we try to find an explanation, a solution in the various spiritual paths and spiritual interpretation of reality of who we are. Nei Qi Gong is just one path, one tool, like many available. For sure it's quite effective. And in this video I want to talk about the different stages that we might go through when we adventure into this interesting journey that can really transform the way we perceive ourselves. And there are three phases usually. And I will start by using, I think it's a Chinese saying, for sure it's from East, which says, when I didn't know anything, the mountains were just mountains. In the middle, when I was studying, the mountains were not mountains anymore. In the third phase, when I finally understood, the mountains went back to be mountains. And I will try to explain the meaning of these three phases that we undergo when we go through some kind of non-dual investigation of ourselves. If you watch some of my YouTube videos, you might find out more about the meaning of non-duality, which basically means the exploration of ourselves included with everything that surrounds us, the existence itself. So in the first phase, when we start out, it's actually the most complicated one because we have no direction. We start a spiritual path because we have some kind of inner conflicts. Life is not that beautiful as we would like to be. We don't find ourselves in the world. We almost feel like aliens here on Earth, surrounded by strange human beings. It's quite normal because it means basically that the external is not satisfying our aspiration, our inclination. So we try to find for some kind of solution which might give an explanation about the whole process of life. As I said, it can be a challenging thing to do, especially nowadays where spirituality has been diluted in many kind of marketing promises and presentations and superficial concepts that are ruining to some extent some of the old tradition. That's why it's very difficult to find things that really work. In the first phase, we experience our own pain. So we experience ourselves actually. We experience our conditionings, our struggles, our traumas, all the story which we call ego that keep all these elements together. It's a painful moment for sure, but for sure we have to start somewhere. It's actually the beginning of the journey. It's the beginning of questioning our life. Our priorities, our choices, our desires, our goals. It's very important because when we fix the internal, actually the external is going to take its own shape. It's about aligning ourselves with life because we are a piece of it. After this first phase, let's say we have picked some kind of tool. It could be Nei Qi Gong, it could be yoga, it could be Advaita Vedanta, it could be Buddhism, it could be Christianity, whatever you want, basically. In this second phase, we tend to build ideas about reality, about enlightenment, which are totally wrong most of the time because they are not first-hand experiences. They are just an interpretation of some text or some sages that have reported their own experiences, which on their own meaning are not false, but are false. They become false because we interpret those things, so they lose their actual value, because we have to remember that we always interpret life through the lens of our own belief system and our own way of thinking. So although somebody is trying to convey the very simple concept, we might distort that concept, and most of all we don't have the practical and first-hand experience which can make us understand what it is. In fact, in this second phase, we might start, let's say, to turn inwardly a bit more. So in the first phase, we are totally external and dissatisfied. In the second phase, we start to go internal. And we start to question also everything that surrounds us, let's face it, by attributing some kind of meaning or by trying to investigate and question things as they are, like we trying to see beyond the superficial perceptions, which sometimes might even lead to great mistakes, such as getting too much on some kind of concept, such as we are one and everything is consciousness, and all these elements that could be true to some extent, but of course, because they're not true for us, but they're just intellectual explanation, might create a distortion of what it is. But it's normal that we undergo through this second phase, because we need to question our own way of perceiving things. So from phase 1, where we are totally external, we start to go in phase 2, total internal, to eventually go to phase 3, which is no internal and external, there is just life as it is. And in this phase, going back to the saying that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the mountains go back to be mountains. Phase 1, mountains were just mountains. Phase 2, mountains were no mountains anymore. Phase 3, finally we understood something for ourselves firsthand. Mountains go back to be mountains. What does it mean? That all the concepts that we built in phase 2, which were necessary to a certain extent to dissociate ourselves from the normal way of operating, from our own operating system, let's call it like this, they cease. They cease to exist. In fact, as we might know, or you might have heard already, the process of growth is actually a process of losing layers, of losing things. It's not about acquiring things. In phase 2, we think that we need to acquire some kind of mystical knowledge, some kind of mystical experience, some kind of enlightening experience. But in phase 3, we start to become simple human beings again. That's why sometimes, especially in the dual teachings, or in general in some kind of spiritual teachings, most of the time we get stuck in phase 2, where we attribute lots of importance to religious aspects, to rituals, to way of being, to stereotypes, to models, because we think that being spiritual means to be in a certain way, to talk in a certain way, to see life in a certain way. But the more we go deeper into ourselves, which means the more we free ourselves from the constant distraction of the senses and of the internal movement of the thinking and emotions and all the rest of it, the more we start to come down to a space which is not very definable, because let's face it, I'm not definable as a person. I'm operating as an instructor of the school Nei Qi Gong right now, but this is not everything that I am. This is just a temporary job that I'm taking to do something good and sustain myself. So in phase 3 we start actually to go into a space of purity. Purity not as a moral kind of guideline. Purity in the sense that because all those elements that were prevailing us from see things clearly, they start to vanish. So in this phase 3 we actually become nobody. no rules, no belonging to any kind of structure, system, total against any kind of slavery due to some kind of religion or philosophical belief. We actually realized that those tools were interesting and useful because they help us to be more introspective and to question things. But in phase 3, when life goes back to be just mountains and life is just life, of course something has changed in us. I'm going to try to address later on what might have been changed in this phase. Things go back to normal. So the tools that were used at the beginning to accomplish a specific goal, they are dismissed because they are not needed anymore. They could become even a trap if we still are too much trapped in it. And something has changed for sure in phase 3, because in phase 1, as I said, we are depressed, full of conflict, we don't find our space in the world. Phase 2, we become spiritual human beings, where we basically we think that we have to behave in a certain way, think in a certain way, act in a certain way, there is good, there is bad, all the rest of it. Phase 3, we are totally rebel in this sense. We are just natural piece of nature, experiencing life, not trying to attributing some kind of meaning to it, because this is the a characteristic of phase 2 actually, where we try to give explanation to things, why the sun is there, why the moon is spinning, why I'm here, all the rest of it. In phase 3, all these questions start to vanish, and that's the most beautiful part of the journey, which could be called as a non-dual journey, because at that stage the internal and the external, they come together, and they come together without interpretation, without give too much meaning. Finally, we are able to experience life and explore the different possibilities connected to it, such as in the Nei Qi Gong, with the external, with internal energy, or I should say just with the vital energy, because for sure we start from our own energy, but then we explore everything that is part of life. And in phase 3, all these barriers, they start to be limitations, and we go back to just being normal human beings, which is the most beautiful thing that we can do. And we free ourselves from time and the psychological movement of the mind, because all those elements, they start to lose grasp on ourselves, because we found another operating system, another way of being human on this planet. I hope this video was somehow helpful for you, maybe with a little bit of insight, which could be useful for our own journey. I'm here to share, as you know, Nei Qi Gong, and also the non-dual teachings in a more essential and refined way, although I learned it through the, let's say, the Buddhist tradition. But you know, as you might know if you watch the channel, that's phase 2. We need to get rid of it, because at the end of the day we're just all normal human beings, and the most important thing is that we find our freedom in life. I hope that you liked the video, and that you feel free to comment, to share your experience here on YouTube or on the blog, wherever you're watching this video. Have a good day.